Hi. So we read this book during the morning meeting. And, at first it appears kind of sad because there's a woman, this old woman, she will only name things that she will outlive so that therefore she doesn't have to leave anybody behind. Um, and there's a little bit of a surprise ending when it comes to a new friend she made. But some of you didn't get to hear it either because you thought the meeting was at 10:30, you weren't at the meeting, or you were at the meeting but you were kicked off because my power went out. We had a big storm sometime in the night and it affected the power, which affects the internet. So I'm going to read it again, and I want you to keep in mind what Cynthia Rylant is trying to teach us about change. Okay? Because the end of the school year, there's a lot of change, right? Things that you're looking forward to, things that you aren't, things that you have no control over. But a lot of us work hard to accept change because with change comes positive, um, kind of unexpected outcomes, right? Nothing ever stays the same. Once there was an old woman who loved to name things. She loved the old car she drove, Betsy. She named the old car she sat in, Fred. And she named the old bed she slept on, Roxanne. And she named her old house, Franklin. Every morning she would get out of Roxanne, here's Roxanne, have a cup of cocoa in Fred, and lock up Franklin, and drive to the post office in Betsy. Oh, this is not Roxanne. The bed is Roxanne. The bed is Roxanne. The chair is Fred. The house is Franklin. And the car is Betsy. She always hoped for a letter from somebody, but all she got was bills. That shows us that she doesn't know a lot of people anymore. The reason the old woman never got any letters was because she had outlived every single one of her friends. This worried her. She didn't like the idea of being an old, lonely woman without any friends, without anyone whom she could call by name. So she began to name things, but she only named those things she knew she could never outlive. Her car, Betsy, had more get up and go than anyone around. Her chair, Fred, had never sagged a day in its life. Not one creak or moan had ever she heard out of her old bed, Roxanne. And her house, Franklin, has been standing straight for over 100 years and still didn't look a day past 20. So check out the chair. Someone noticed these faces, right? Faces in the house, face in the chair. It helps us personify them, make them seem like a person. The old woman never worried about outliving any of them, and her days were happy. One day, when the old woman was out soaping some mud off of Betsy, telling her that Franklin wouldn't want to be seen with a car that didn't keep its bumpers a little cleaner, a shy brown puppy came to the old woman's gate. The old woman had not named the gate because the two of its hinges had rusted off, and she could tell the gate wasn't long for this world. The shy brown puppy wagged its tail and looked a little hungry. The old woman stood beside Betsy and watched the puppy for a while. She said. Then she walked into Franklin, got a chunk of ham from her refrigerator, and came back outside. The old woman gave the ham to the hungry puppy and told it to go home. She told it that Betsy always makes puppies sick, and Fred never allowed puppies to sit on him, and Roxanne wasn't wide enough for a puppy and an old woman to fit on. And besides all this, Franklin couldn't tolerate any fur, dog fur. So the puppy went away. Wonder how Betsy makes puppies sick. But the next day the puppy was back. The old woman was sitting in Fred reading a book on everlasting flowers when she saw the puppy through her window. Go home, she called to the puppy. The puppy wagged its tail when it saw her. Go home, she called again. But the puppy just kept wagging. The old woman noticed that it looked a little hungry, so she went to her refrigerator. She gave the puppy a hunk of cheese and 2 biscuits. Then she told it to go home, and the puppy went. That night, as the old woman lumped up the pillows on Roxanne, she thought about the puppy. It was a very nice puppy, she thought. It was a very pretty puppy, but it couldn't stay. If it stayed, she would have to give it a name, and it could never last as long as Franklin or Fred or Betsy or Roxanne. She might even outlive it, and she didn't want to risk that. She didn't want to outlive any more friends. She would just keep telling it to go home. Every day, the brown puppy showed up, came to the old woman's gate. Every day she fed it and then told it to go home. Always it went away, and always it came back the next day. This went on for many months. The puppy got bigger and bigger until soon it wasn't a puppy anymore. It was a dog, and it was still a dog with no name. And all this time, the old woman had gotten a new dresser, which she had named Bill, a new wheelbarrow she had named Francine, and a new concrete pig for her garden, which she had named Bud. But the dog she faithfully fed at her gate every day still had no name. Since it had no name, the old woman didn't have to worry about outliving it. And she thought herself pretty clever in this. But then one day, the shy brown dog did not come to the old woman's house. She sat and Fred, and she watched the gate all day long, but the dog never came. The old woman felt sad. The next day, the dog didn't come. The old woman drove Betsy around town looking for the dog, but she couldn't find it. The old woman felt even sadder. The following day, when still the dog did not come, the old woman knew she had to do something. She picked up her telephone and called the dog catcher. "Have you caught any shy brown dogs?" the old woman asked the dog catcher. "Oh, we've got a whole kennel full of shy brown dogs, ma'am," said the dog catcher. "Was yours wearing a collar with its name on it?" "No," said the old woman sadly, and then she hung up the telephone. The old woman sat and thought about the shy brown dog who had no collar with a name. Wherever it was, no one would know. It was supposed to come to the old woman's gate every day, and she was supposed to feed it and tell it to go home every day, and that things were always supposed to be this way. The shy brown dog had no collar and no name, and no one would ever be able to know these things about it. The old woman made a decision. She locked up Franklin and drove Betsy to the dog catcher's kennel. Then she said to the dog catcher, so here's a moment of character change, right? She's breaking her pattern and she's making a different decision than she has before. She's like, well, you know what? I think I'm going to accept change because this change was making me very happy. She said to the dog catcher, I've come to find my dog. He asked her what color it was. It's brown, she said. He asked her how old it was. About a year, she said. Then he asked her what its name was. The old woman thought a moment. She thought of all the old, delightful friends with names whom she had outlived. She saw their smiling faces and remembered their lovely names and thought about how lucky she had been to know those friends. She thought about what a lucky old woman she was. My dog's name is Lucky, she told the dog catcher. He led her to a big yard filled with white dogs and black dogs and brown dogs. The old woman looked and looked and looked, and finally she saw her own shy dog sitting beside a gate. The dog was looking at Betsy, parked in the driveway. Here's where they first noticed the smile, too, on Betsy. The dog was looking at Betsy. The old woman called, "Here, Lucky! Here, Lucky!" And at the sound of her voice, the shy brown dog came running. From that day on, Lucky lived with the old woman, and he always came when his name was called. Turned out Betsy didn't make all dogs sick, and Fred was happy to allow a dog to sit on him. Franklin didn't really much mind a little dog hair. And every night Roxanne was sure to make herself plenty wide enough for a shy brown dog and the old woman who named him. Oh, look, here's even a face here. 2 eyes, some eyebrows, some hair, smile. So I want you guys to think about a possible theme, or you can even choose this theme of change and how I don't know how how the book shows change, and basically how the book shows us that change is a good thing, right? So I'm giving you the theme or one of them, and you can write about this. You just send me a quick email, just a task to do. I'm not going to put it on Google Classroom. Okay. Good night.